A poor farmer saved a millionaire woman from an out-of-control SUV, and she fell in love with him. The winding mountain road snaked along the edge of the Appalachian Range, gilded in the golden hues of late autumn. One side clung to towering cliffs of stone and pine. The other dropped into a breathtaking and deadly valley that stretched for miles with no guardrails to stop a fatal slip. Clara Westwood gripped the leather steering wheel of her silver Range Rover, a Bluetooth earpiece in one ear and her eyes flitting between the curving road and the glowing GPS on the dashboard. The voice in her ear chirped with urgency. "Clara, the Paris buyers just moved the call up an hour. Can you jump on a Zoom as soon as you get back?" Her assistant rattled off. Yes, I'll handle it. Just keep everyone calm," Clara replied breathlessly. Try to keep her focus amid the chaos of running a luxury jewelry empire. Then it happened. A flash of fur, a blur across the road. A deer darted from the forest, leaping into her path. Clara gasped, yanked the wheel left. Tires screamed. The SUV skidded, fishtailed violently, then began to slide sideways toward the edge. No, please." "Oh, God," she screamed, heart slamming in her chest. "Clara, what's happening?" "Clara." Her assistant's voice shrieked from the earpiece, but she could no longer respond. The car's rear tires found no grip. The vehicle tilted toward the abyss. 300 feet away, Ethan Miller had just finished tying a bundle of pine logs to his old Ford truck. He was heading back to the valley to repair the roof of Mrs. Dempsey's cabin before the evening frost hit. Hearing the screech, he turned and saw the SUV slide, wheels half off the road. Without a second thought, he grabbed the longest beam from the back of the truck, muscles rippling beneath his flannel shirt, and sprinted across the gravel just as the SUV's nose dipped toward the void. He jammed the timber beneath the front axle, wedging it against a boulder on the inside slope. The impact knocked him sideways, but the car shuddered to a halt, teetering but stable. Inside, Clara had blacked out. Her final image before darkness was a man's face, sun-warmed skin, steady hazel eyes under a cap of tousle brown hair, the deep calm in the storm of her panic. Ethan yanked open the door. Hey, can you hear me?" he said, kneeling beside her. He checked her pulse, examined her pupils, a shallow cut above her brow, a bruised shoulder, nothing broken, but she was out cold, her breaths quick, shallow. He looked at the horizon. The sun was dipping fast. The nearest hospital was hours away, and the roads up here would soon be treacherous in the dark. No time. He gently scooped her into his arms, carried her to his truck, and laid her on the passenger seat, bundling a blanket around her. Then he drove home. His cabin sat at the edge of a clearing, ringed by whispering pine. Smoke curled from the chimney. He carried her inside, past a creaky wooden porch into a living room filled with hand-carved furniture and the scent of split cedar, resin, and distant earth. Ethan placed her on the old couch near the fireplace. He stoked the flames, added fresh logs. He brought a basin of warm water, dabbed her wound, set a steaming mug of peppermint tea on the table beside her. As the fire crackled and shadows danced, he adjusted the lamp's dimmer, lowering the light to a golden glow. He sat beside her for a moment, watching the tension in her face slowly ease, her breath becoming steadier. "You're safe here. No one will hurt you," he whispered and stepped away to give her space. Outside, night blanketed the forest. Inside, the cabin hummed with quiet life, the pop of firewood, the creak of the roof beams, the distant cluck of hens settling in the coop. Ethan moved through it all with quiet grace, making her a soup with vegetables from his garden, keeping the house warm, the light soft. As Clara lay unconscious, the rhythm of the house held her like a lullaby. Her lips twitched once, then her fingers curled lightly around the edge of the blanket, and for the first time in a long while, her dreams were quiet. The morning light filtered through the pine slats of the cabin, casting long golden bars across the wooden floor. Clara stirred beneath the thick wool blanket, blinking up at the unfamiliar ceiling. Her body ached, her shoulder throbbed, and her mouth was dry. She sat up slowly, the blanket slipping down, revealing the simple but tidy interior of the room. The scent of pine wood and smoke clung to everything. She wrinkled her nose. "This place smells like a lumber yard," she muttered under her breath. Her eyes darted to the rustic furniture, the fireplace still glowing with the last embers of last night's fire, and the absence of any modern convenience. With a jolt, she reached for her phone. The screen flickered to life. No bars, no signal, no Wi-Fi, no connection. She pressed redial. Nothing. Frustrated, she called out, "Hello, is anyone here?" A few seconds later, the door creaked, and Ethan stepped in, wiping his hands on a towel. He was already dressed in jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt, his hair tousled from the wind. Clara snapped, "I need to call someone. My people are looking for me." Ethan's tone was calm, unshaken. "No signal here, but the doctor's coming in a few hours. He can take you into town if you want." She exhaled sharply, feeling the panic crawl up her spine. Her world, meetings, interviews, orders, production lines, felt galaxies away from this wooden box in the woods. "Great," she muttered. "Just perfect." Breakfast was already set out on the table. Freshly baked bread, scrambled eggs, a jar of apple preserves, and a pitcher of what looked like homemade apple juice. Clara eyed it with suspicion. "I usually start my day with an oat milk latte and a green smoothie," she said, mostly to herself. But the hunger clawed at her stomach, and the scent of the warm bread proved stronger than her pride. She picked at it, chewing quietly. Ethan said nothing. He simply pulled a chair beside her and carefully folded a soft towel behind her back as a cushion. She was taken aback, unsure how to respond. "I'm not an invalid," she said stiffly. "I know," he replied gently, "but your shoulder's bruised." The silence afterward was not awkward, just different. Ethan stood and headed outside with a wooden crate, leaving Clara to herself. She wandered to the front door and slowly pushed it open. The outside was bathed in golden light, and a breeze carried the sharp scent of pine and earth. Chickens clucked in the distance, and from the shed behind the cabin, the rhythmic tap of tools began. She followed the sound. Ethan was working in a small open-air shed, chiseling a piece of timber. He moved with a slow, methodical grace, each movement intentional, his eyes focused but peaceful. Clara leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, watching. "You do this every day?" she asked. Ethan glanced up with a small smile. "Most days. The wind tries to tear roofs off up here, if you let it. Gotta keep everything in shape." She tilted her head, watching the way he measured, cut, and sanded with such precision. "How do you know where to cut?" she asked, unable to hide the curiosity in her voice. He paused, ran a hand down the grain of the wood. "You listen. What speaks if you let it." Clara blinked, the simplicity and beauty of the answer catching her off guard. There was something almost poetic in his words, in the way his fingers moved with such care, not force. For the first time since she'd arrived, the knot in her chest loosened. She sat down on the steps outside the shed, watching as the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the trees in hues of copper and fire. The scent of sawdust mingled with the evening air. The sound of the chisel against what was steady, calming, like a heartbeat outside her own. And in that quiet moment, she found herself not wanting to look at her phone, not needing noise, just watching a man with sawdust in his hair and calluses on his hands, carving something beautiful from silence. The rain had started sometime before dawn, soft at first, then steadily turning into a relentless downpour that beat against the tin roof of the cabin. Clara stirred beneath the blanket, groggy and disoriented, until the sound of the front door opening pulled her fully awake. Ethan's voice followed. "Doctor's here." A few minutes later, an older man in a heavy raincoat stepped into the warm glow of the cabin, carrying a worn medical bag. He was kind, efficient, and after a quick examination, he assured Clara that nothing was broken, just a few bruises and a mild case of shock. Clara listened half-heartedly until she heard the real blow. "The road's gone," the doctor said as he packed up. "Landslide about 2 miles down. No way out until they clear it. Probably another day or two." Clara sat bolt upright. "You're joking." He shook his head. "Sorry, Miss Westwood. You're stuck here." As he left, Ethan turned to her, towel in hand. "You should rest. I'll make some tea." "This is ridiculous," Clara snapped, pushing the blanket off and standing up too quickly, wobbling. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't smirk. He just looked at her with that same quiet calm. "You're someone who almost died yesterday," he said softly. "That's enough for me." Clara opened her mouth to retort, but stopped. Something in the way he said it disarmed her. She sat back down, frustrated, but not with him, with herself, with the world, with the absurdity of being cut off from everything familiar. Hours passed in an odd rhythm. The rain kept falling, steady and gray. Clara sat curled on the armchair near the window, sipping the peppermint tea Ethan had made. It was surprisingly good. Across the room, Ethan worked at a wooden table, carving with gentle focus. She watched as he smoothed the backrest of a rocking chair, brushing away shavings with the side of his hand. His brows furrowed slightly when he concentrated, and his hands, large, callous, moved with a grace that defied their ruggedness. "Who's that for?" she finally asked. Ethan didn't look up. "Mrs. Caldwell lives half a mile up the trail. Her old chair broke last winter. You're making her a new one?" "Promised her I would." Clara hugged the mug close. "You do this a lot." "Woodwork," he said, pausing to glance at her. "It's what I know. It's honest work. Keeps the hands busy and the mind quieter." She smiled faintly, something soft blooming in her chest. It had been a long time since she'd seen someone do something just because they cared, not for a paycheck, not for recognition, just because. Later, as she padded across the cabin barefoot, she paused to find a neatly folded pair of thick woolen socks sitting on a stool beside her bag. A little tag was attached to the top with uneven handwriting. They're warm and soft, like good company. Clara stared at it for a long moment. She pulled the socks on, her cold toes sinking into the plush warmth, and something in her heart gave way. That night, as Ethan stirred stew in a cast-iron pot, Clara found herself telling him about her mother, about the way her mother used to work at a tiny bench in the back of their store in Chicago, bent over silver and gemstones, hands always covered in fine dust. She had this calm about her, Clara said, eyes distant. She didn't say much, but when she held something she was making, you could feel the care in every touch. Ethan stirred the pot, nodding. "Sounds like a good woman." "She was," Clara whispered. "She taught me everything I know about design, but somewhere along the way, I got lost in brands and deadlines and press releases." Ethan served dinner, simple vegetable stew with biscuits, and they ate in quiet companionship. The storm outside softened to a whisper. As he cleaned the bowls, he said, "Wood is like a story. You carve, it reveals." Clara laughed for the first time since the accident. "I've been designing jewelry for 15 years, but I forgot how to feel beauty. I only saw output results." He didn't answer, just offered a slow smile. Later, curled beneath the woolen blanket, Clara stared at the ceiling, the scent of pine and smoke lulling her deeper into comfort. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Inside, it was warm, still, and safe. And for the first time in years, she fell asleep without thinking about the next morning's meeting. The next morning greeted Clara with golden sunlight pouring through the wooden window panes, casting warm stripes across the hand-woven quilt wrapped around her. The chirping of birds filtered through the tall pines, blending with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant crow of a rooster. For a moment, she lay still, disoriented by the lack of alarms, emails, and traffic. There were no glass walls or conference calls waiting, just the scented smoke and the rhythmic crackle from the stove downstairs. She slipped out of bed and padded barefoot to the small porch, wearing one of Ethan's flannel shirts that hung loosely on her frame. The floorboards creaked under her steps as she stepped into the morning air. Before her, the world stretched out in serene simplicity, rolling green hills, a modest garden plot, and beyond it, Ethan kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds with calm precision. Clara stood watching him for a few moments, arms wrapped around herself. Then, almost shyly, she walked down the steps and across the dewy grass. "I can help," she said, surprised at herself as much as him. Ethan looked up with a soft smile, wiping his hands on a rag. "You sure? These plants can be a little judgy." She laughed and crouched beside him. The soil was cool and damp between her fingers. She helped him pluck weeds and gently turn the earth, the smell of mint and basil rising in waves. There were no instructions, no rush, just the two of them working in rhythm. At one point, She reached for a spade and winced as a thorn caught her finger, drawing a thin line of blood. Ethan's hands were immediately there. He pulled a folded cloth from his back pocket and wrapped her finger with quiet care. There, now you're officially a farmer. Clara looked at him for a long moment. His hands were rough, warm. Sure, you live like this every day. I live, he said simply, tying the cloth snugly. Do you? His words pierced her more than she let on. Later, after lunch, fresh eggs, warm bread, apple slices. They walked as would shop, nestled beneath a towering pine. It smelled of cedar and sawdust. Light spilled across the workbench, illuminating a half-finished rocking horse. I thought you might like to try something different, Ethan said, handing her a chisel. Clara hesitated, staring at the block of wood in front of her. I work with diamonds and platinum, she murmured. Everything I make is worth more than this whole barn. He chuckled. Design is design, but this teaches you patience, humility. He showed her how to hold the tool, how to find the grain, and follow it instead of forcing it. When their hands touched once, twice, neither said a word, but the connection lingered. As the sun began to fall behind the hills, Ethan placed a tiny carved leaf in her palm. It was simple, smooth, with soft grooves running down its center. For your sketchbook, he said. Clara stared at the little piece of wood. Her throat tightened. I just function, she said. I wake up, I perform, I sell an image. I forgot what it means to just be. Ethan didn't try to fix it. He just held her gaze and said, You weren't made to just function. You were made to shine. She clutched the wooden leaf to her chest. For the first time in years, someone saw through the layers she built around herself. Not the brand, not the curated perfection, just Clara. That night, as the wind whispered through the trees and the fire glowed softly in the hearth, Clara curled under a quilt, the carved leaf still in her hand. She wasn't whole yet, but she felt something real stirring inside her, and when sleep came, it was deep and dreamless. The third morning arrived, draped in fog. A low hum echoed across the quiet meadow as a black rescue helicopter descended into the clearing behind Ethan's wooden house. The spinning blade stirred the pine-scented air and rattled the tin roof. Inside, Clara zipped up her suitcase with trembling hands. The warmth of the cabin still lingered on her skin, clinging like smoke from the hearth. Her eyes swept across the room one last time, soaking in every inch. The worn table, the rocking chair by the fireplace, the stack of cardwood toys in the corner. She reached into her coat pocket, then the dresser, then the bathroom counter. Her fingers trembled. My necklace, she whispered. Panic edged into her voice. She dropped to her knees, searching the floor beneath the bed, the space behind the nightstand. It was here. I had it when I came. From the open doorway, the rescue pilot checked his watch. We need to go, Ms. Westwood. Weather's shifting fast. Another hour, and it may not be safe to lift. Clara looked up, eyes wide. It's a daisy pendant. My mother gave it to me before she died. It's all I have of her. The pilot hesitated. We don't have time for a full search. I'm sorry. Ethan stepped inside, a soft frown on his brow. I'll find it, he said gently. If it's here, I'll find it and send it. Clara met his gaze, something raw tightening in her chest. Thank you, she said, voice tight, for everything. She walked past him, her suitcase bumping down the steps, and climbed into the helicopter. As they lifted off, Clara stared out the window. Below, the cabin grew smaller and smaller, the roof like a matchbox in a forest of giants. Ethan stood motionless in the clearing, one hand raised, the other clenched by his side. He did not chase. He did not call out, but somehow his stillness said everything. The ride back to the city blurred past her. Skyscrapers swallowed the sky. Horns blared. Phones rang. Her name flooded inboxes. Designs delayed. Contracts pending. VIP clients waiting. She walked into her downtown studio, flanked by glass and chrome, but the walls pressed in now. The silence of the forest echoed, louder than all the buzzing chatter. Everything moved fast, too fast. She answered emails, reviewed sketches, approved samples, but every task felt hollow. She found herself staring at a block of silver for 20 minutes, unable to picture it as anything more. That night, she lay in her high-rise penthouse. The bed was too big, the silence too sharp. Her hand instinctively reached for the necklace at her collarbone and met only bare skin. 2 mornings later, her assistant handed her a package with no return address. It was small, pine-scented, and tied with a strip of hand-woven twine. Clara took it into her office, hands trembling slightly. Inside was a wooden box carved with intricate leaves, and a single word burned into the lid. Mara. Her breath caught. Her fingers hovered over the latch before lifting it. Inside, nestled in soft linen, was her mother's daisy pendant, shining whole, untouched. She covered her mouth, tears slipping free. But it was not just a return of the necklace. It was the box itself, the detail in the carving, the warmth of the wood, the time and care it had taken to shape something so simple and so meaningful. Clara whispered through her tears, "He saw me, even when I forgot myself." She pressed the box to her chest, eyes closing, and for the first time since she left cabin, she made a decision that did not involve anyone else's expectations. She would go back. 2 weeks later, Clara Westwood left a highly profitable meeting halfway through a heated debate about the spring jewelry line, ignoring the stunned expressions of her executive team. She walked out without her designer heels, without her makeup artist, without her assistant, just her keys in one hand and a wooden box cradled in the other. The sun was setting behind her penthouse skyline as she drove east, the mountains rising slowly in the distance. A Range Rover climbed the winding path she now remembered with a vivid ache, the tires crunching gravel as the last of the signal bars disappeared from her phone screen. She welcomed the silence. She wore a soft cream-colored sweater, jeans, and hiking boots. Her golden hair was swept into a loose bun, and her eyes, tired but bright, stared ahead. The wooden box rested on the passenger seat, lid slightly ajar, revealing the daisy pendant nestled inside. As the cabin came into view, half hidden in the embrace of pines, her heart began to pound. The porch light glowed faintly in the dusk. Smoke curled from the chimney. She stepped out, boots touching the same earth she had walked barefoot days ago. The air smelled of pine and promise. Ethan was there, standing by a stack of chopped wood, axe resting by his side. He saw her and didn't move for a second. Then he smiled, not surprised, not shocked, just quietly, deeply glad. "I think," Clara began, her voice almost cracking, "I left something behind." Ethan nodded, walking slowly toward her. "I knew you'd come back." There was no dramatic embrace, no swelling music, just 2 people standing close, eyes speaking where words weren't needed. He led her inside. The house smelled just as she remembered, with smoke, aged pine, and the faintest scent of apples. Nothing had changed except the way she saw it now. This wasn't a place of inconvenience. It was refuge. They sat by the fireplace. Neither said much. The crackling fire filled the space with warmth. After a while, Ethan got up and disappeared into the back room. When he returned, he held a small bouquet in his callous hand. Wild daisies, lavender, and rosemary. Clara gasped softly. "I picked them from the garden you helped plant," Ethan said, holding it out to her. "You see, we plant something with care. Someday it blooms." Clara took the bouquet slowly, pressing it to her face, inhaling the soft, wild scent. "You kept it alive?" "So did you." They sat again, and her hand reached for his, fingers brushing against his palm before curling around it. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes glistening. "Thank you for seeing me. Not my brand, not my image, just me." Ethan looked at her, his eyes warm and steady. "Always." The fire snapped gently. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. In here, nothing needed to be fixed. Nothing needed to be built. What existed was real. That night, Clara lay beneath the thick quilt in the bedroom with windows open to the stars. The cool mountain breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of pine. She held the wooden box to her chest, her mother's necklace safely inside. She slept deeply for the first time in months. No dreams, no meetings, no expectations, just peace. Clara turned down every interview request that flooded her inbox. Morning shows, fashion magazines, lifestyle features, all offering exclusive deals to hear her story about the accident and the mysterious man who saved her life. She declined them all. Instead, she drafted a short email to her company's board, taking a 3-month sabbatical. Asterisk, please redirect all creative queries to Jenna. I'll be offline, asterisk. And just like that, she stayed. It wasn't easy at first. Clara Westwood, once known for her impeccable designs and structured days, now woke to the crowing of roosters instead of city alarm. The air smelled with smoke and damp earth. The floor creaked beneath her every step. The mornings were cold, the nights colder, but something in her heart began to thaw. She and Ethan fell into a rhythm, slow but purposeful. Clara learned to bake bread, not from a recipe, but from touch and instinct. She chopped vegetables with clumsy fingers that slowly grew confident. She planted herbs in the backyard and smiled the first time a green sprout broke through the soil. She lit oil lamps instead of flicking switches. She began to walk barefoot on the cool wooden porch just because it felt good. Ethan, patient and unhurried, taught her how to use woodworking tools, not as a master would, but as a friend. Clara carved her first piece, a small, uneven fox with crooked ears. Ethan clapped anyway. She laughed so hard she cried. One evening after supper, as they sat by the fire sipping warm cider, Clara mentioned something offhandedly. I used to sketch toy designs, little wooden figurines. I never did anything with them. They were just for me. Ethan looked up. Why not bring them to life? What do you mean? We could make them for kids. Some here never had a real toy. That was how Open Pine was born. Within a few weeks, the barn beside Ethan's house was transformed into a workshop. They sanded benches, arranged tools, set up shelves. Clara painted the windows white. Ethan carved a wooden sign and nailed it above the door. It read, "Where real things begin." Children from the local community started coming on weekends. Some were shy at first, unsure of this elegant woman with gold hair and soft hands. But Clara knelt beside them, guided their fingers with gentleness, and slowly they trusted her. Together they made spinning tops, animal figurines, tiny cars. Clara designed, Ethan helped build. The children laughed and called it the Magic Shop. At night, when the world was quiet, Ethan would sit beside Clara on the porch, carving quietly. She would sketch by lantern light, barefoot and content. One evening, as a summer breeze rustled the pine trees, Clara turned to Ethan and asked, "Do you smell that?" He paused, lifting his head toward the wind. Then he smiled. "Just you?" She blushed, leaning her head on his shoulder. Weeks passed. The stars above seemed brighter than ever. Then, on a warm July evening with lanterns swaying gently in the wind and the scent of rosemary in the air, Ethan stepped out onto the porch with something behind his back. Clara was seated in her usual chair, sipping tea, her hair loosely tied. She looked up and tilted her head. "What are you hiding?" Ethan grinned, stepping closer. He got down on one knee. From behind his back, he brought out a small wooden box, not ornate, not polished, just honest pine carved firefox. System, carved with care. He opened it. Inside was a ring, simple silver, with a single tiny daisy carved into the band. The same daisy her mother used to sketch, the same flower on the necklace Ethan had returned. Clara gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Ethan looked into her eyes. "Will you be my wood?" he asked, voice low, warm, and trembling just slightly. Clara let out a shaky laugh through tears. "That is the strangest, most perfect thing anyone's ever said to me." And then through tears she whispered, "Yes." The wind carried their laughter into the trees. 1 year later, Clara stood in the heart of a sun-dappled clearing, wearing a smudged apron and holding a carving tool in one hand. Around her, half a dozen children leaned over wooden planks, trying to etch their initials into the soft grain. She guided them patiently, her laughter ringing like wind chimes as she wiped sawdust from one girl's cheek. Ethan was nearby, balanced on a ladder, adjusting the small tarp roof that covered a makeshift reading nook filled with secondhand books and colorful pillows. The old cabin, once quiet and weather-worn, now thrived. A wildflower garden hugged its base. A wooden swing swayed under the pine trees. A play area made from logs and ropes echoed with children's laughter. A little boy with shaggy brown hair tugged at Clara's apron. "Who's the man with the beard?" he asked, pointing toward Ethan. Clara looked up, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "That's Ethan," she said gently. "The man who saw me when I couldn't see myself." Later that week, on a golden autumn afternoon, Clara and Ethan were married. There was no orchestra, no crystal chandeliers, no designer gowns, just a scent of pine, a clearing in the woods, and the gentle rustle of dry leaves underfoot. The children tossed handfuls of golden leaves into the air as Clara walked down the natural aisle, barefoot in a soft white knit dress. Her bouquet was a cluster of wildflowers Ethan had gathered that morning, daisies, lavender, and clover. Her hair was loose, caught only with a single wooden pin Ethan had carved himself. Their guests were neighbors, children, and a few close friends who had visited the workshop and never stopped coming back. Clara's father, once distant, now stood by her side, his eyes misty. He handed her a small wooden box before the ceremony. Inside was the daisy necklace Ethan had once returned. She wore it with pride. When it was time to exchange rings, Ethan reached into his pocket and brought out 2 bands carved from the trunk of the very tree near the cliff's edge where he had first saved her. As he slipped the ring onto Clara's finger, she looked up at him, her voice shaking with emotion. "Why would—" Ethan smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. "Because you're the story I want to carve forever." She did not cry. She laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong. That night, after the guests had gone and the children had fallen asleep in the nearby cabin bunk beds, Clara and Ethan sat on the front steps of their home. A gentle breeze played with her hair as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in hues of gold and amber. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand resting on his chest. "We're real," she whispered. "That's all that matters." Ethan nodded, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. Always. No headlines would be written about their wedding. No tabloids would care. But in a quiet corner of the mountains, 2 people had found something rare. Not luxury, not fame, but love. The kind carved slowly, shaped by patience, and polished by truth. And that, in the end, was everything. If the story stirred something deep within you, if it reminded you that love in its purest form often blooms in the quietest corners, then we invite you to be part of our journey. At Soul Stirring Stories, we bring you tales that heal, inspire, and gently remind us of what truly matters in life. Stories of resilience, grace, and the kind of love that doesn't need luxury to shine. Subscribe to our channel to never miss a moment that might just change the way you see the world. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones carved slowly with patience and heart.